Well, cool. Let's just rock right into it, man.
No
Good
worries.
to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to finally meet you.
I know, it's very nice to meet you. I've followed you.
I've been following you for a very long time, so it's
something in common.
Yeah, a couple things, I think, and it's funny because this podcast has become like I don't know, like it's become like the Australian podcast. I have so many Australians on the show. I just put up, do you know Paul de Gelder?
Yeah.
You do. So I just put him up the other day. I'm like, now I'm staring at another super ripped, bald Australian dude, and I'm like, I want to be an honorary Australian. What do they call it? That you have the OA?
Yeah,
OAS?
OAM.
So that's like being knighted, right?
Yeah. Well, Paul's story it's amazing.
It's crazy, right?
I bumped into him in Bondi. He was I'm not sure if he's still living there, but his attitude to it and towards the story is just phenomenal.
His ability to kind of transcend that experience and be this inspirational figure. Like I said this in the podcast. Like I knew his story was crazy, but I didn't have a grip on like what a great storyteller he is and how inspirational he is in the way that he tells the story.
That your grave from the hospital when he describes.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So he lives here now.
Does he? Right.
Yeah, he lives in Venice. So he's having a go here. He does all the Shark Week stuff for Discovery Channel and making a name for himself out here. So,
Yeah, you've got a big following in Australia, mate. Well, we love ultra sports. We love swimming.
Well, the swimming culture is insane. I mean, I don't think Americans really appreciate or can understand the reverence with which, the swimmer is perceived in Australian culture.
Yeah. It's definitely our number one Olympic sport. And it's, in Europe, they probably send their kids to soccer training or, learn soccer, and in Australia it's learn to swim. It's the first sport pretty much.
Right.
As soon as infant aquatics is like, it's not compulsory in every school, but it will be pretty soon, I think. So learn to swim with the first sport everyone learns.
Yeah, right away, like as soon as you can walk, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But you're originally from Poland, right?
Yeah, so I've got a pretty interesting story. I was born in Poland. My parents, my dad worked for the Polish consulate, so we traveled a lot growing up. So I moved to India when I was 1.5. Wow. I actually learned to swim in India, for a country that's kind of probably more known for its cricket and, and those sort of things.
Not a big swimming powerhouse.
No. Yeah. So, but it's funny how history repeats itself, because I'm living in Bali most of my time, and I go to a little bit of a country club. My kids spend most of their life in a country club. Yeah. So very much the way I grew up. And, Dad used to drop us off on the way to work and pick us up 8 hours later. And, the only thing I could do was just play in the water and have fun. And that's how I sort of got this affinity with the water that I can't describe. That was early on.
So you spend most of the time in Bali and then the rest of the time in Melbourne?
Yeah. So I sort of split my time between my business, which I've got a skincare company now, and we sort of, we've got a skin fitness range of products, and then we also my kids live in Bali, so I split my time between Bali and Melbourne.
Do they go to the green school?
They do. They go to the green school, indeed.
So funny. Every day I hear about the green school.
Really?
I have a very good friend here in Malibu, and he splits his time between Bali and here, and he just left again, and both his kids go to the green school.
Yeah.
I've got a really good friend who's a meditation teacher named Charlie Knowles.
Right.
He's got a whole bunch of kids that go to school there. And so I'm always seeing photos and little videos of what goes on there. And then our mutual friend David spent time there, and so I'm very familiar with what goes on there. I mean, that place is unbelievable.
Yeah, it's insane. And John Hardy founded it, the jeweler, and it's quite insane. In terms of, from me, I've seen the development in my kids, the growth in terms of their confidence, and it's just a different approach to education, which they kind of. It's a community. It's very cult-like sometimes, but it's
right. I heard my friend Chris said you drop your kids off from school and then all the parents hang out all
day.
I know, nobody's working. Like what is going on there? And there's no walls. It's all outdoor education
it's
essentially.
Bamboo. Yeah, it's basically self-sustainable. They go water turbines, solar. It's a really good sort of from my kids, especially my son, where he's got a bit of a speech impediment, and he was really shy, especially socially, and within 3 years, he's now narrating the school play in front of hundreds of kids, and he's got this air of confidence. But it's still, I think it's just the school's empowered him to believe in himself, and he's still got a beautiful personality. So, so it's definitely it gets them kind of street ready in a sense.
Right. Yeah, it's super cool. It's really cool. Yeah. All right, well, let's talk swimming.
Okay.
So you grow up, basically with wet hair, for as long as you can remember.
Back then.
Yeah, I mean, were you like a talent from the get go? Did you know like early on, like, oh man, this is like my thing, or were you just playing a whole bunch of sports?
No, I definitely played a lot of different sports, but for me, swimming was something that, because when I traveled, as I explained earlier, went from India back to Poland, Germany, Canada, and then eventually moved to Australia, and all these things were changing in my life, and from languages, school environments, and new, circles of friends, etc. The only thing that kind of remained constant for me was my swimming. It was kind of like I could join any squad in any country and kind of fit in.
Did you learn all the languages everywhere you lived?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I had to learn English and German, and I'm still learning English, actually.
But Polish is your native first language.
Yeah, so I speak Polish at home.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Wow.
So for me, swimming was something that I used to gravitate to because I was kind of good at it, and it kind of gave me acceptance around in the circle of friends that I was in. But my tennis is actually, my family is actually prominently a tennis family. My sister played professionally, and so did my dad. So I tried. I didn't quite have the temperament for tennis. Being a sprinter, I sort of too much time to think on the tennis court.
Right.
So, so I definitely, was something that I had a really good sort of strong idea that I wanted to pursue it for a very early age.
And how does it work in Australia? Is it like a club program kind of thing, or is it through the schools? Like, I know once you get noticed as an emerging talent, there's all these, there's all this structure that comes into play. But at what point?
Look, it's still very amateur. It still comes through traditional club, club structure, and then there is state funding, state institute of sport, and then there's obviously the overarching sports commission who sort of facilitate through the Australian swimming programs. But it's still very much, the swim schools feed the swimming clubs, and then you can obviously join some of the elite squads that still exist. But it's still predominantly a club setup. And we're still a small country, and we're actually in the middle of our Commonwealth Games trials at the moment on the Gold Coast.
That's going on right now?
Yeah, so... it's still, for us, it's still a pretty simple process.
Does Australian Institute of Sport still exist? I just remember when I was a kid, I would be like, man, what goes on there? Like, they look serious.
Well, I spent 8 years there.
Oh,
when I was 15, I was tapped on the shoulder by two guys. One was Gennady Turetsky, who was the coach of Alex Popov, and the other one was Jim Fowler, who came from Etobicoke in Toronto.
Oh, yeah.
And so
that was Paul Bergen's team before that, I think.
That's right. And then Mitch Ivey before that.
Right.
So, so it was sort of at the age of 15, and they said, we want you to move to Canberra and live there in the lead up to Sydney. And, they already were identifying who was good, could be good and could be a good fit for the relay. And for me, the coach of the greatest sprinter of all time just asked me to train with him. So, a year later, I packed up the bags, and Mum and Dad drove me up the highway up to Canberra from Melbourne. So, so I moved out of home and made that sacrifice to solely pursue swimming. And the institute is, people sort of they're not very complimentary about Canberra. It's a pretty boring place. But
that's where Paul's from. He was telling me a little bit about what it was like there. I mean, it's definitely different from what you imagine Melbourne and Sydney to be.
Absolutely.
Like.
It's a military, it's a town, and where it's got a couple of good universities as well. But for us, it was ideal for what we were doing. Just training. We had great facilities. Still, the facilities are far superior to any other complex in Australia. So now it's more used for, there's no more resident program at the Institute of Sport. It's more sort of for camps, etc.
Right,
Similar
right.
to Colorado Springs, actually.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And does it work the same in terms of Olympic trials and qualifying for the team as it does in the States, where you have a meet and you get first or second and you go, and otherwise you're at home?
Pretty much. And, traditionally we have our trials 2 or 3 months prior to the big meet. Having seen the success of the US team, this time we're actually having the trials from the Commonwealth Games only 5 weeks out of the Commonwealth Games. So I think it makes sense. I think there's a lot of opportunity for error, and a lot of things can happen between now and say 2 or 3 months time. So I think it eliminates the there's always grey in a black and white scenario.
Right. Well, it's a super tricky equation. I mean, for people that are listening who aren't familiar with swimming, I mean, you basically bust your ass for 9 months or however long, and then you taper down for a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Maybe a month if you're a sprinter like you. I don't know what your particular protocol is, and you hang it all out to dry in that one meet. And if it's trials, that's usually as competitive, if not more competitive, more high pressure than the Olympics itself.
Absolutely.
You make the team, and then you're looking at 5 weeks. Yeah. And that's a very difficult kind of thing to approach, because you can't just coast for 5 weeks. You got to kind of build back up, but you can't build back up too much. And some people hit it right, and some people miss it altogether and have really lackluster Olympic performances.
Yeah, exactly. Look, we've tried it, and I think I think swimming does. We only have that big meet once every 4 years, the Olympic Games, and the world champs are on every second year. But it is, we have two big hitouts a year in Australia. Not like the US, where you've got the NC2A system, and you can really race competitively and have really good sort of hitouts regularly. Whereas, so Australians have struggled finding competitions, being so geographically so far removed from everything. But it's we're getting there. I was very fortunate that my era was, we had the likes of Thorpe and Hackett and Perkins and O'Neill and Samantha Riley and Lethal Jones and Libby Trickett. Then it almost they probably got away with not racing as much, but the depth of in the world of swimming has changed. I think you've got the Eastern European countries that have come up a lot, and also the Asian countries are swimming really well as well. So it's a different picture to when I was swimming.
But you were a member, like a gold-plated member of the golden era of Australian swimming. I mean, that period of time, was the ascendancy of Australian swimming. I mean, you guys were a powerhouse. It was unbelievable from, 98 to 2008 or something like that, 2006. And that Sydney Olympics was really kind of a coming out party for Australian swimming. I mean, you've been a global power for a long time, but that was something else altogether. Right?
Yeah.
Like it was really it was quite something.
To we were, that. To get an Olympic Games on home soil for Australia, the one prior to that was in '56 in Melbourne. And, the Aussies have so much pride in their sport. They're so fanatical, similar to you guys. And it was a magical 2 weeks in Sydney. The weather was fantastic. There was no traffic. Everyone was happy and smiling. So I don't know, the Olympic kind of fever.
But the talent pool that you had was unbelievable.
Yeah, look, it was it was Hackey's first Olympic gold. Was Ian broke the world record in the 400 and won the silver in the 200, but won the 4x1 and the 4x2 with me. And we had it was Kieran's last swim, but.
Right.
We had the likes of Susie O'Neill still, winning gold in the 200 freestyle. And, it was just an amazing team. And it sort of was led by these guys. We had a really good mix of up and coming, the likes of Hackett and Thorpe, which I mentioned, but, the Susie O'Neill and Kieran Perkins on the latter end of their careers, and sort of myself and Jeff Hugel and a couple others slotted right there in the middle. And, I was very fortunate to, as I said, to have, the Olympics on home soil was just phenomenal. And I was part of the race that I'm more known in Australia for playing an air guitar rather than
I know we're gonna get into that.
Okay,
well, I had Anthony Irvin in here, so we talked about that a little bit, and I was like, I got to get Klim in here to hear it firsthand. But I think that is my, before I met you, I'm like, that's my visual image of you. Like, I just remember that's like imprinted, seared into my brain, like that moment. So I mean, maybe walk us through that story for people that are new to the show don't know it.
Sure. So look, I mean, you guys, the Americans had never been beaten in the 4x1 freestyle relay in the Olympic history until that moment. So the inception was 1972, I think, of the event. So it's, and, you know, through the NC2A program, and, you know, you're just so strong in relays. You know how to race them, how to put the team together, heats and finals. And we had one guy, Brett Hawke, who was racing in the 50 freestyle, was from the Auburn system and Auburn University, and he kind of he trying to helped us how could we put together a team that could challenge his superpower in the 4x1 freestyle relay. And we had myself, who was, you know, I was the highest ranked freestyler, number third in the world. Ian Thorpe was a 400 freestyler, but had some potential.
A little bit.
Chris Feidler was our older statesman, and Ashley Callas was a rookie. So we really didn't have a team that was, you know, like in the American team had pretty much, I think, had three swimmers in the top 10. Well,
we had Gary Hall, who's the number one shit talker. So he's the one who instigated this whole thing. And Tony Irvin and Jason Lezak. And who was the fourth?
It was Neil Walker.
Neil Walker, right.
Yeah.
And those are more prominent names at the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly Gary.
Yeah.
You know.
And look, I'm still in. It's funny how sport, you realize how sport for us, it was everything, you know, like for us winning that relay, it changed my life, you know. People still walk down the street and do this.
I'm sure they do, yeah. And we should point out that you broke the world record in the 100 free leading off that relay.
Yeah, it's to this point, it's still my best ever swim, you know. 48.1, yeah. So it just, look, we basically, this is the strategy we had. We basically wanted to try and get a lead somehow, and then get the Americans to over race each leg. And you guys aren't used to coming second very often, so it was kind of, it threw them off the game a little bit.
Now we might be a little bit, but back then, no. Yeah.
Back then, no. So it's sort of, and our psychology was really just to make sure that last 20 meters into the wall was really strong. So we're focusing on back ending every single leg, and if you look at the splits after the second, third, fourth swimmer, you guys are always turning first at the 50-meter end, and we were turning first at the 100-meter end. So it was just a real tactical event that sort of fell our way, but it was. And look, to be honest, and to give Gary credit, he's an amazing ambassador for the sport. He was the first one to shake my hand after the event, and I'm actually still in touch with him these days. And you know, that's kind of, you know, 18 years ago. It's long, it's history, but it sort of shaped the sport. He had a great rivalry with Popov that I used to watch in '96, when, you know,
I mean, he was amazing because he brought entertainment to the sport by being this, you know, really bold, you know, kind of outspoken Muhammad Ali type character. And just for people that are listening, what happened was, he went on record. He told a reporter, "Oh, we're going to smash the Aussies like guitars or something like that, right?" And so when you guys won, you're all playing air guitar, like.
It was actually Ian Thorpe's idea. So, so it was one of those moments. So it's still regarded for us in Olympic history as one of the
it's one of the greatest races ever. Yeah. One of the interesting things you just said, like, you guys really focused on, you know, the last part of those 100-meter legs. And one thing that you are unique in is you have this very interesting way that you finish your races. You're the only person I've ever seen who lunges into the wall with a couple underwater dolphin kicks on your way in. I've never seen anyone else do that. Like, where did that come from? And why do you think that was like your advantage? Yeah,
look, I trained a lot with, obviously, Gennady Turetsky being my coach. And initially I started swimming, trying to emulate Alex. And I wanted to have this beautiful high elbow recovery. And but I very soon found out that I wasn't 6'8". I didn't have his physique, and as a drill, we started swimming. We used to have dolphin kick freestyle with your head up. It was kind of a water polo drill, just to sort of emphasize this good dynamic recovery. And then we have another drill, just a windmill drill with straight arm freestyle. And then we just thought of combining both of them as a drill only, dolphin kick with straight arms, just to really emphasize each stroke and throwing your hand forward, etc. I started my first time I did it, I just felt like I was floating from stroke to stroke. Each kick kind of gave me extra inertia from stroke to stroke. And Gennady got me at like 24 point something for a 53. And I was like, this could actually work. Right. And, and my legs were my weakness. And probably psychologically, I always used to think, oh, I hope my legs don't go. I hope my legs don't go. And the less when I wasn't psychologically strong in my races, I normally probably used to kick earlier than I needed to. But yeah, so it became a good way for me to keep momentum into the wall.
And why do you think no one else started doing this?
Well, I think it's that transition from freestyle kick to dolphin kick. You have to really.
Awkward.
It's awkward. Yeah. So I know that Michael Phelps tried it a couple of times at the last Olympic trials and. But I think, when he got to Rio, he went back to his original stroke. So, look, it's, I had to be innovative. I'm not much taller than the average, not much stronger than the average. And so
you're pretty fucking strong, dude. Looking at you right now.
I'm fatter now.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're a big boy, let's get that straight. But I think you innovated in another way, which is that you did have this like straight arm recovery in your butterfly as well. And now when you look at swimming now, everybody's doing that. Like the swimmers look weird. Like it doesn't look like, I'm like, what are they doing? That doesn't look anything like the way that we used to swim. And, I'm older than you, but I was at I went and did a swim practice with Connor Dwyer down at USC with John Vanchek. And got to swim with all these guys, and like they're all doing that. And they're like, put your head down. I was always taught to put my head up, waterline here, and they're like the technique aspect. They figured out so many things.
Absolutely.
And I think your straight arm recovery was very unusual at the time. No one was really doing that.
Yeah, and look, and that's actually touching back on the Institute of Sport. It was. Australia swimming had to be resourceful because we didn't have hundreds of swimmers coming through, and we used to fall back a lot on all physiology and biomechanics and nutrition. So we kind of had to use everything that was available to us to get the most out of our team. So I tested the stroke a number of times, and for me, it definitely gave me, I wouldn't say an advantage, but it just sort of kept me especially when the suits came in, and I had a stronger, sort of more aligned core. I could sort of keep my momentum into the wall. But as you said, pretty much all the sprinters are doing it now. So,
it's crazy to see, right? So. What, like 21 world records? How many world records?
Something like that.
8,000 Olympic medals. And then you had that crazy world championships where you won, everything pretty much, right?
Yeah.
I can't keep track of all the results.
7 medals, which is, at the time, after Spitz was the first time anyone had won 7. So then obviously... Michael came along after that.
Right, of course. And rewrote everything. But is there a particular performance that stands out as your favorite, or does it all bleed together as one big experience?
No, I think for me that week in Perth was, as an individual performance, was probably not my most defying because it's sort of...
98.
98. I had broken the world record in the 100 fly in October, and the World Championships were in January, and I was in great shape physically, and also I was still pretty fresh. I hadn't been, I'd spent only a few years with Alex, and I was really sort of targeting the 200 free, and I managed to win that on the first night, but and I started getting really tight towards the end of the meet, and I qualified only 4th for the 100 fly final, and it's the first time that in that week I thought that, shit, I've got a couple more swims to go. I'm not going to even finish this meet. So, I stood up and won that in a pretty close to world record time as well. So that was a week that kind of all my, with the training with Gennady and the miles, we used to swim up to 100 Ks a week, which is about 60 miles a week at times. And it all started really paying off, just, falling back into that. I had the mentality of every time the gun went, I didn't really pace myself from heats to finals, whatever. I used to just swim
just balls out, no matter what.
Out, pretty much. Yeah. So, and it all just started coming into play.
So, what did you learn from Gennady? Like, what made him a great coach?
I think he was a really interesting coach because he had he was able to adjust not only his approach in terms of the sessions, what we were doing for every swimmer, because we're all different physically,
right.
And we all recover differently, and we all need different stimulation, and we have so he was able to get the most out of all the swimmers, and even creating 5 different workouts for 5 different swimmers on the board in one session. But then also being able to mentally get, he would treat myself different to Alex, of course, and then Matt Dunn, who was also my training partner, he'd have a completely slightly different approach. So that communication with the athlete was probably his key. Like I knew that, he'd probably leave me alone for most of my warm-ups and just appear out of the blue just for the right time when he needed to see me. And he had a great eye. He could probably watch me for 10 seconds. I dive into the warm-up, he could tell you how I felt.
Right.
And I think that having that real great intuition. So he was well-educated but had a great eye for the sport.
It sounds very similar to where Bob Bowman comes from. I was telling you earlier, I was listening to his podcast with Michael Gervais. He's interviewing Bob Bowman, Michael Phelps' coach, who's also coached a number of other Olympians. And he was talking about the importance of the coach-athlete relationship and how it's a partnership and how you really have to individuate, amongst these different people, and how he could tell, as soon as one of his athletes walked on the deck, he'd just look in their eye and he'd know like what kind of workout they were going to have, because it was such an intimate, close-knit thing. Yeah. And trying to crack like, okay, like what, how is, what makes Michael tick? Like what's going to motivate him?
Exactly.
Do you come at him hard? Do you come at him soft? Like that's going to be different for every athlete. And I think it's, look, when you're dealing with the elite of the elite and you got like 10 people you're coaching, it's one thing. You're a club coach, you got 50 kids, 5 in a lane or something like that. It's a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
But the more that you can understand, what the sort of psychological makeup of that individual.
And then so people sort of wonder how the swimmers still manage to break world records. And it's, the suits have gone back to almost a traditional. So it's the training methods. It's being able to, I think that the coach swimmer relationship now is so different to say the 50s and the 60s where it was kind of everyone did the same thing. Right. It was almost a survival
Whoever
of
can,
the fittest.
Yeah, that's the way it was when I was swimming.
Yeah. So now you can really, I think Brett Hawke, who's obviously swam for Australia now, coaches at Auburn, he's been able to pioneer that a bit further as well. And, everyone's just the attention to detail, from everything from, nutrition to strength training to, technique, etc.
Right. So you were competing in the era of the technical suit. And there was that thing like, well, these records are never going to get broken. Like they're just going to stay forever, right? Yeah. And then sure enough, are there any records that still stand from that era?
I think there might be a couple. I think Biederman's 200 freestyle still exists, but there aren't too many, which is amazing. Which is good to see.
No, it's good. But it begs the question of like, what is the outer limits of human capability? Because when I look at swimming now, like I'm like, what are they like? I can't even relate to these times. Like I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, exactly.
It progresses so quickly, much more quickly than track and field. It started to slow down a little bit, but it's amazing the frequency with which world records in swimming get broken. Yeah. When you look at that, like, what do you attribute that to? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but
look, I think we spoke about, the specific sort of training approach, and I think it's also swimmers don't tend to over swim as much as what we used to. I think it's become more quality rather than quantity, and even I know some of the open water swimmers that swim 10K and 25K, they're only really training, at 50 to 70 kilometers a week, but it's quite intensive. It's, I think the quality of the training and just periodization. So it's really well planned. I think it's just more, I think we've just become a lot more clever, or they have.
Yeah. I mean, when in the 80s, it was just get in. I mean, we'd be putting in 20,000 meter days with regular, like all the time, you know, I just walked around like a zombie, like periodization. Like, what is that? You know, like there was no conscious awareness of any of that kind of stuff at that time.
And the most common thing I'm sure you probably remember, like most people would miss their taper. They would just never come up.
And your hose, like your whole year was about that, you know?
So, you know, like you were so tired 3 weeks out of trials of your main meet, but you probably needed another 3 weeks.
Right, I know. I don't think there was an appreciation for recovery and like if you beat yourself down that hard, like just how long it's going to take for your body to bounce back. And I think I was chronically overtrained like my entire career.
Yeah. And it's funny, I don't know, I don't know who led that, but I know that the Russians were training a lot. I know the Aussies were pretty well known for overtraining as well. I think it just, the word spread around the swimming pools that you have to do this much.
Better. But there was that era in the 80s. There were, the coaches in the US that were really hitting that hard. You know, Mark Schubert was part of that at Mission Viejo, Dick Schulberg, Paul Bergen. Paul Bergen was like notorious for just like, you'd hear stories about these workouts that these guys were doing, and you're like, well, I got to do that, you know. And there are only a few people that could weather that and survive it and excel at that.
Yeah, exactly.
But now with periodization and rest and being very specific about what you're doing and why you're doing it, it's like you don't just jump in and go all out every set.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What about the strength training regimen?
Look, I think the jury's still out on that. I think there's anyone really yet to nail that in terms of what really actually transfers into the pool. It's such a, the mass of water that we pull through the water and the hand being accelerated through the movement rather than, doing a seated row is not quite, doesn't translate, mimic. So I think there's certainly a lot of power movements that have, I started doing a little bit of power lifting, which was great for my start and great for starts and turns. But in terms of overall sort of, weight training, it's still, and I think some of the conditioning, it's I think the core stuff is really important. But I think, they're still trying to probably work it out. I used to experiment a lot. That's most things I used to experiment with.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot that can be learned there. I remember at Stanford, like Jeff Kostoff, who held the high school national record in the 500 free for like 30 years and, won institute, went to the Olympics, like incredible distance swimmer. We used to like make fun of him because he could only do like one push-up. Like he literally could barely do a push-up. He's like one of the greatest swimmers ever, of that era. And and you're like, oh, well, I can't, obviously if you're swimming the 50 free, the 100 free, it's a different equation. But it's like, why can't he do that? But he can do this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, then there's so many variables in swimming, obviously, but also, people that can't swim appreciate that, like how important feeling for the water is and working with this medium that we have to actually work with rather than, push through it or work against it. So, but, having, seeing a Caleb Dressel, for example, the physique is slightly, now that the suits don't exist, I think the guys is a little bit leaner. They're still super powerful, but they're not as bulky as what they were probably 10 years.
But there's a lot of tall guys though.
Yeah,
it seems like the guys are bigger in general, maybe not as bulkier, but I remember watching the 50 free final, Rio, cheering for Tony.
Yeah.
And I was like, he looked tiny compared to all those other guys. And he's a tall guy, you know? It's like, I was like, man, the sport has come a long way.
Yeah, it's, and it does sort of vary. I remember, just before my era, Gustavo Borges, Alex Popov, Gary Hall. Gary Hall's the shortest at 6'6". So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Well, what's interesting about your career is it's easy to go, 21 world records, like all these Olympic medals, incredibly storied swimming career. But, it wasn't all roses, man. Like you had a lot of misses, along the way and like a lot of obstacles and hurdles that you struggled to overcome. Despite like these relay golds, you still struggled to medal in the individual event. You set the world record 4x100 free relay, but you didn't make finals in the individual event. How did you mentally, approach trying to, deal with that kind of thing? And why do you think you struggled in the individual events when the relays, like, you know, went so well for
Yeah.
you?
Look, I was definitely to this day, all my relay splits are definitely my best splits, and I think psychologically, I was sort of, I definitely put pressure on myself to perform in relays, but I don't know if it almost like I felt like having the camaraderie of the team, it almost deflect some of that. And, you know, I think as I said, I had a very sort of simple approach to my swimming. I used to pretty much have one strategy, and I used to tense up a little bit, and, you know, I never progressed too much from heats to finals. And, yeah, I think so. You know, as soon as you tense up a little bit in sprint, it's, you know, it costs you. So, I was able to win a few individual sort of big meets, but the one, you know, obviously even leading, you know, the 100 fly with about 10 meters to go and being touched out for silver. Right. And then same with 100 free in Sydney. It just sort of, it was sort of, I could see that there was some bad muscle memory that was creeping in some of those races. So I think 98 was a success because I hadn't created some of those bad sort of patterns.
And how much does, you know, the external pressure play in? I mean, it had to be so heightened in Sydney.
Yeah, it was definitely heightened, and because the 100 fly was towards the end of the program, was day 6, and I hadn't won an individual, and I was sort of, you know, and I had swum a pretty bad heat, and so the pressure was even greater. I swam an incredible sort of 85 to 90 meters, but unfortunately they don't hand out the medals then. So but look, to be honest, you know, I've had some amazing races where I have handled the pressure. So it was because of my, you know, being able to stimulate myself so quickly behind the blocks, and sometimes I would overstimulate and go over the edge sort of. But so if I look at it, you know, my downfall sometimes having that ability to progress in terms of time from heat to finals.
What is your like sort of mindset approach to you know, gearing up for a race? Like, do you have a ritual, or how do you do visualization? Like, what was your practice?
Look, I used to try and warm up as close as possible to the event. So pretty much I would get out of the, I was very routine driven. So pretty much from the moment I walked through the door, I had the set routine. It was very dynamic and active warm up. So dry land and getting in the pool, and pretty much it was pretty intense. It wasn't very long, but I would normally, you know, swim a lot at pace, and pretty much from that point go and suit up and minimize any time where I could sort of, you know, get distracted. Right. So for me, the approach was really just to not to overthink. That's why I tried to, if I had a spare hour and a half, I would probably swim that race over about 100 times in my head, where I try to have the routine just kept me moving through and getting to the blocks without overthinking it, and you know, playing the race in my head. And that's normally the downfall.
Right, I got you. Are you motivated? Are you somebody who's motivated internally or externally? Like, are you thinking about how to have your best performance, or are you thinking about how to beat the other guy?
Look, I think most of the time is how to get my best performance. It's almost how to put it. I knew how to put that performance together because I've done it so many times. It's almost just hitting a certain number of cues that I had in my race. So, you know, my breakout and my underwater kick was obviously one of my strong points. My breath control in that first 30 meters, approaching the wall correctly. Then, you know, so I had a number of cues that I try to hit, and I used to focus on those. And when I was distracted and when I wasn't hitting those, then I'd start thinking about the other guy, look over my shoulder. And that's times where either I was, you know, swum over the top of or whatever. So I think it's like with anything, the clearer my head was before the races, the better the outcome always. So
yeah, it's interesting in swimming because it's you and the clock, and you're in your lane, and you have a choice whether to look over to the next guy and see what he's doing or not. Yeah. And ultimately it just comes down to you putting in your best effort. And yet at the same time, it is a competition. Like some people feed off of that. They want to, you know, and when you were swimming butterfly, like you're breathing to the side, right? You do like a Mel Stewart thing where you're like checking the other guy out.
I used to love Mel Stewart.
Yeah. He was the first guy to do that. So, I mean, was that a conscious thing? Like, I want to be watching what the other guys are doing, or?
Oh, no, definitely not.
It was more an efficiency thing.
Yeah, an efficiency, trying to keep it was. Then Pankratov did it after Mel Stewart, and then, obviously I adopted it as well. It's more just keeping the body nice and flat. Michael Phelps and Ian Crocker, they're kind of, Ian was a bit higher, but Michael just, keeps that really low body position, with a flat breath. And I was able to do that with turning my head slightly. It became a little, became habitual after a while.
Right.
Yeah.
So around 2001, you start having these injuries, right? And it kind of sets you back. So you're like, I couldn't figure out, like, you were swimming, you swam through 2007, but you kind of struggled, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Shoulder problems and things like
absolutely.
that.
It's funny that we're sitting here right now because that injury that actually ultimately, cost, my career, and I cost my career, but I retired because of it. Well, I broke my ankle just before the Fukuoka World Championships, so we were playing some basketball to warm up before swim practice.
Swimmers should never play basketball.
I know.
No.
I know, and that sort of followed. That led up to causing some issues with my lower back, and I had back operation at the age of 25 the following year, and then that led to being off balanced, and that created some more pressure on my shoulder, and then 3 shoulder operations later, I qualified for Athens in the relay squads and swam all those, but I never had that sort of individual success that I had prior to 2000 or 2001.
Right.
Yeah, that was it was probably and mentally that was a really tough time.
It had to be.
Yeah, I mean,
because how old were you at that? Like 2006, 2005.
Yeah, 2006. I was 28.
So you're still in the game. Like you could still be, crushing it at a high level. So I would imagine that was frustrating. So you retire, but then you try to make this comeback for London also, right? Like why would you what inspired that?
Look, for me, fitness and exercise and swimming is still a big passion of mine. I still love to do it, and I swim more in the open water these days, but I always feel better after it. And I actually did a few crazy things. I did a couple of adventure races down in Tasmania, which is, probably the coldest, rugged place in Australia. It was a week-long sort of adventure racing, and I did a bunch of runs and swims and got on the bike even. I was a lot skinnier then. But and I was still in reasonable shape, and, I started having a family. I had 2 kids at the time, started my own business, and I thought, look, it was a couple of things. One, I wanted to prove to myself that I was still in good shape. I wanted to see how fast I could swim with all these different new variables in my life. But then I also wanted to kind of show my kids, set an example of being able to achieve a pretty high standard in my sport. And it was a bit of a dare initially, and it kind of turned to this 18-month campaign. And, ironically, I ended up swimming the same time as I did at the trials, at what I did on my last meet when I retired. Oh, wow. So I managed, 7 years later, maintain it, or 5 years later, get back to similar levels. So unfortunately, we had the birth of James Magnuson came through, and Cameron McAvoy, and those guys started going, in the low 47s, which I was nowhere near that big that pace.
But that takes balls to give it a go like that, man. I applaud that.
Yeah, well, we were expecting a 3rd baby at the time. It's probably easier to be in the swimming pool than to change nappies and to manage all that.
Training is very simple. You live this monk-like existence where everything is like organized for you.
Absolutely, and that was the thing that I realized. I had started a whole new business. Had this growing family, all these variables, still swimming, and people say, how did you manage to swim so much, and how did you stay focused? I'm like, I wish all I had to do now was just
life
swim.
Would be easier.
So easy.
I know, it's like a lot easier then. Well, one of the things I think is really interesting about your story and perhaps unique is, that between you and Ian Thorpe and Grant Hackett, you guys were super stars in the wake of Sydney. Like, American audiences, I don't think can really fathom, like I said earlier, like the extent to which you were just thrust into the media in like a massive way. And that's a very difficult thing to figure your way through,
Yeah.
you know, and you seem to be somebody who figured that out. Like, and I think it seems, as somebody who doesn't know these individuals and just is kind of looking at it as an outsider looking in from 10,000 feet, you know, that's something that I think really, you know, probably took its toll on Grant and on Ian. Like they've had their sort of very public, you know, kind of struggles with trying to figure out, you know, who they want to be. And, you know, you go from this place where, like you said, everything's taken care of for you. You know exactly what you're doing. Yeah. And then suddenly it's like a free-for-all and a free fall. Like, okay, what do I do with this now?
Yeah, it's definitely been a very... it's not just swimming. I think and it happens here in the States. I think our identity as athletes is so strong, and you know people reinforce that in every opportunity they have, and then probably for guys like Ian and Grant, and you know they reached their success. Like, Ian won the 400 freestyle world championships when he was 15. Like my oldest daughter's 12. Like I can't imagine her going to
being a world champion, in a couple of years.
So you know, and he became, you know, like Ian. Obviously, there was so many eyes
like Michael
and expectations
Jordan in Australia.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and I think, and then Ian definitely struggled with that. There was a lot of pressure on him and the level of expectation. So I think it's just realizing that identity, it's that swimming identity, even though it will live on forever, it's only temporary, and having sometimes a fear of that transition into life after sport is, you know, it can be daunting, and or even finding your place in life and what you actually, because you're so good at swimming, what's going to replace that void, and what's going to give you that
and who's going to help
stimulus?
you figure that out? I mean, you know, when everything is being taken care of for you, you know, it's like, what do I do now? Like your whole life is premised on, okay, I'm going to be on this podium at the Olympics in Sydney, but there's no thought that goes into what happens the day after that. You know.
It's sort of I've been fortunate enough to work with a group called the Chosen Experience, and we sort of talk about purpose and intention and you know looking after all these different areas of wellness, if it's spiritual and emotional and environmental, social. So I sort of I think when when you're actually in that swimming bubble and the sport bubble, you're kind of taken care of, and when you come out of it, there's a lot of areas of that wellness that fall off, especially socially. You know, your swimming fraternity is your family that no longer exists. You know, spiritually, swimming is very meditative. I'm sure you probably agree. For me, it's the most meditative exercise that I can do. You know, So from a fitness point of view, and you know, we're talking about nutrition, everything was all in place. So you have to start. Until you find those sort of dimensions, how you're going to be able to fill them, and it takes time, and some people do it better than others.
Yeah, I think that, and I've mentioned this in the past, that you know, sports organizations, whether it's swimming or the NFL or the NBA or the NC2A and whatever specific discipline, you know, within that, needs to have organizations or like governing bodies that are charged with helping athletes make the transition into civilian life. I mean, it's the same with like a soldier coming back from a deployment. Like there's a sense of confusion, you know, it's like, well, this was my career. Now like that, snap your fingers, it's done. And you're just a normal person. And that can be very destabilizing for a lot of people. And I think the higher the higher your achievement, the more kind of challenging that transition can be. I mean, obviously you have opportunities and cool stuff comes your way, but trying to figure out like, well, who am I? Like, I'm not the swimmer anymore.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Wait, who, you know, like, I mean,
what's the new passion? When do I put this energy that I had for this drive? You know, how do you suddenly replace this drive that you had? And, you know, you see most people swimming on, you know, like there aren't too many swimmers that actually never, you know, don't swim on, because it is plays such a big role, you know, probably more symbolically than anything. But it is, it is quite tricky. And I think it's better through the NC2A system because of the education that provides with, you know, the athletes. But in Australia, I think we've struggled with, you know, certainly, you know, the athletes aren't supported financially from the sport, so they need to find careers, and then that becomes it becomes quite daunting on them.
Yeah. How is Grant doing? Are you in touch with him?
Yeah, he spent a fair bit of time with Michael Phelps.
Yeah, I knew that
recently, and he's been he's back. He's living in Melbourne. He's working in corporate finance again. So again, for him, the physical exercises plays a big role. So now, even though he came back, he missed London as well, but he's still back exercising, and he's got a good routine. And so I think he's back on track.
So you knew that did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like when you were swimming, were you hatching your plan for how you were going to start a business?
No, certainly not. Like I obviously had a good sort of example with my dad being he was export and import, and he sort of did a lot of trades and things like that. So I watched him do his thing, but I didn't have a tertiary education. Most of the guys went to uni or whatever. I sort of fell out after my first year. So, but I had to realize I've been exposed to branding and marketing. I've been a product for many companies in the past. So I had a little bit of insight into what it takes to promote and sell something. So, the opportunity came about when there's two companies within a couple of months that approached me to endorse the skincare product. So I thought, there must be something in that. I'll just so I did a bit more research, and the skincare market in Australia was definitely growing, especially for men. So I sort of did a A4 business plan on one bit of paper and spoke to a few different people, and then. Pardon the pun, but took the plunge into becoming I wouldn't call myself an entrepreneur, but I guess,
I think you are. Why not? Why wouldn't you call yourself that?
Yeah. So look, it was incidental sort of the way I fell into it. Being a swimmer, you have to wash yourself from the chlorine, and you protect yourself from all the harmful UVA and UVB rays. So. I sort of had a little bit of insight from my history, and I had to apply that into life after sport.
Yeah, I mean, we just walked around with super dry skin and green hair.
Exactly, and then mid-afternoon,
dude product for
chlorine would start
lick your hand. The whole room smells like chlorine.
Yeah, exactly.
So you start this company, Milk.
Yeah,
which I don't know why, but I didn't even think about it until yesterday. I was like, oh, that's Klim backwards.
Yeah, that's right.
But that's so obvious, right? It's a great name for a line. It's cool.
Yeah. So we just had skincare products for men, and as you said, we guys and generally in Australia and the US, they still need a bit of prodding when it comes to self-maintenance and looking after their skin. So I wanted to create products that were easy to use, multifunctional, affordable, but guys were still cool. Like they still were would be proud about having them on the base and in the bathroom. So I created a really simple sort of range, but it wasn't smooth sailing, that's for sure. I made a few costly errors, and obviously, I think that was probably it was more. I think the business world has been much more challenging than swimming.
Why?
There is a lot of things that are out of even when we're talking about.
You can control everything.
Pretty much everything,
except the guy in the other lane.
Exactly, even then you're trying because you think you can, but in business you're dealing with so many different variables, from retailers to manufacturers to partners, stakeholders, etc. Whatever it might be, it's so vast, and then people are you're actually liaising with and dealing with people on a daily basis, and it becomes a skill, how you manage those situations.
What did you learn from your swimming experience that does translate into being successful in business?
Yeah, I'd say there's probably 4 or 5 key sort of learnings that I take from it. The first, probably that sense of team. So our business is very much a horizontal business. We don't have not very hierarchical at all. So, making sure that culture within your business is right. And it doesn't have to be business. It could be a club or organization. So I think it's, people that enjoy coming to work or having things in common, or having even maybe things in common, but common values. So that was, for me, was really important. I think that was what made the Aussie swim team so great. It was almost like this unwritten code that we had. We had no idea what there was, but it was,
the camaraderie.
Exactly.
The teammanship.
Innovation too, I think obviously something that, as you touched on with my stroke and the suits, and I think always, like if we came out with some great products that were selling okay, but you can't just rest on your laurels, so you have to innovate constantly. I think knowledge as well. I think when I was swimming, I think I had about 12 of probably double thick books like this. Literally, I would log every stroke, every session. So all the sessions, I wouldn't even need to write it down on pool deck. I would remember pretty much everything that we did. And I've got about, as I said, a dozen of those books. So I think you gain knowledge about yourself to then make better decisions with training, etc. So in business too, I think it's really important to know your business and know your numbers. So then we can make better decisions if we're investing money in certain areas and marketing, etc. So, and then now we can, now I guess in swimming, people can get information about other swimmers a lot easier than what we could. But so in the business world, we really try and tap into, data about your competition. Knowing your competition is really important as well. I'm just not sure what else.
Well, I would think, and I'm probably projecting, but the mindset that you have to be competitive, at the level that you were in swimming takes a very sort of singular, focus and ability to kind of hone in on a goal and like work your way towards that, right? And so obviously business is a little bit different because you have all these people and personalities and all of that. It's not just you, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And as a swimmer, you can be kind of a control freak, like this is what I'm doing, and all that kind of stuff. And so there has to be some aspects of that translate into your to be determined, like this is what we're moving towards, but then also having to let go of certain things that were important in swimming to let other people in and delegate and things like that.
It's almost like I was being empowered to do what I was able to do in the pool, whereas I think in business it's almost me empowering other people.
You have to be the coach.
A little bit. So that's and look, as I said, I've had some great coaches in my career, so I've been able to fall back on that as well. But I think, and then just the other thing, which is I just remembered, is just the relentless nature of running your own business. It's very similar to swimming and sport, where you definitely have bad sessions, bad swims, but just the ability of coming back the next day, no matter how bad it is. And you may show up in not the best mood, but you still show up. But so that was so probably those are my key learnings. But
and so now, how you're shipping in countries all over the world, right? Like, are you in the US?
Yeah, so we're only on Amazon in the US, but we're sort of our focus is sort of Australia and the proximity to Australia. So all the Asian countries from China to Korea to Japan and Hong Kong and Singapore. So really sort of our products lend itself really well through, especially the baby range, which is all natural and sort of really sort of simple, and it seems to be going really well into that region. So, but I think, culturally we're so similar in the lifestyle between sort of Melbourne, Sydney, etc.
I can see it doing well here. And I like it's it's clean and it's like minimal in its design. Like it's just very like simple in kind of a beautiful, elegant way.
Yeah, thank you.
I haven't tried the products yet, but just based on like following you and stuff and reading up on it, it's cool. So that's cool. So that's your main thing, right? I know you do these retreats too, the chosen experiences.
Yeah, it's a chosen experience. It's actually good because it helps me to, I sort of facilitate some of them. I do some of the goal setting workshops and some water skills and swimming, etc. But it also helps me to recalibrate every now and again because, we sort of I know what the tools are for me to be the most effective person, but sometimes, in life, you get when you get busy or, there's things that don't always go your way. So, so Chosen has been a great way to meet amazing people, meet successful people from different walks of life, but then, do things that are really good for yourself spiritually, mentally, physically as well. So I enjoy that. I still, enjoy talking to the team, working with the swim team. I worked with them in the lead up to Rio, which was, unfortunately, wasn't a great games for us, but, it's great to see these, the youngsters that are I wonder if I was that mature when people were looking at me back then, but and almost the way they hold themselves and with all these extra distractions, I think that they seem more professional than what we were back then.
Yeah, like they come out of the womb now like media trained because everybody is a public personality now.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
And the awareness that young people have around that is interesting. But it's also like, it's so distracting. It's so easy to fall into a social media hole rather than do the hard thing that requires you to turn the phone off.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so look, I think that so I still enjoy working with those guys, but it is tricky actually because I think I heard you say the other day, I still enjoy, I enjoy being on Instagram every night.
Yeah, I do too.
Seeing what other people are doing and, sharing my stories, especially, if it's something cool. So, but I do, when I have a digital detox at Chosen or whatever it might be, I do appreciate the other side as well.
Yeah, I was looking at the website for Chosen, and there's a lot of trips, man.
Yeah.
It's like, do you go to all of them?
No,
they're happening all the time.
There is a bunch. There's a bunch in Bali. Iceland is a very amazing location. I just came from Guatemala. I was there last week, and I was there as a guest, so that was nice to take a week off for myself and to recharge a little bit. But New Zealand. So those are the 4 iconic locations.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. They also tend to have volcanoes and I don't know what else, but they always seem to be in a very, very exotic, kind of pretty rugged environment.
I want to go to Iceland so bad.
Yeah,
I've never been.
We'll have to get you there.
When you look back on your swimming career, what do you think you were able to do that others couldn't, or like what do you attribute your success to beyond just sort of the training and whatever God-given talent you have? Like, I know you mentioned being an innovator, but do you think there are certain things that you were keyed in on that others weren't that allowed you to get that extra advantage to achieve?
Yeah, I think definitely the innovation in my stroke definitely helped me a lot, because I think if I hadn't found that the stroke that really worked well for me, I think I'm not sure where I would have been. I think that was the key, but I think almost that I had a really, really sort of strong drive for my sport from a very early age, and I think that I think growing up Eastern European sort of background, and it almost like people ask me, where did you have it from? I said, I don't know. I just had it.
Yeah.
It's something this purpose that I wanted to swim, So I think that was definitely an advantage. And I think when it did come off, my mindset was really, I was able to, I was pretty strong mentally when most of the time. There was obviously a few where I wasn't, but so I think even, my mindset put together with my purpose and I guess, with the new stroke, etc. Right. I think those 3 things.
Did you ever think? I mean, you're a Polish citizen, right? You could have swum from Poland.
Yeah, I probably could have. Yeah, I know, but I wouldn't feel right, especially after so much time and money invested by the Australian.
But what about in the comeback up to London, though?
The Polish team is doing so well now. That's right. Yeah, there's a bunch of guys that are in the 100 free and 100 fly, so it probably wouldn't have been that easy either.
When you look at what Michael Phelps was able to achieve and the impact that he's had on the sport, how do you conceptualize that? Like, what does that mean to you?
Oh, look, I was lucky enough to be in Rio and see his 20th gold, and also, see all his swims, and raced him a bunch of times as well. So, I've realized how hard it is to come back, and not only just to come back, but to come back and dominate. Especially and he's been in the dumps a little bit when it came to he fell out of a lot of people fell out of love with him, and he was able to I think could see how important swimming is to him as a person, and he did definitely. He had the drive that was probably 10 times greater than mine as well. But I like to see I like the story because it did sort of the career did take a downward turn, but he was able to bounce back, which was an amazing feat for me. But just his ability just to be able to come back from race after race. I did it once in the blue moon.
The longevity is unbelievable. And I think it's only natural that something's going to break along the way. Like you can't maintain that for 20 years,
exactly.
you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, shocker, like, you know, that there are going to be periods of time where he doesn't want to go to the pool. Like, you know, that has to be the case in order for him to be able to continue and perpetuate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's super brave how he's kind of come out and spoken publicly about the mental health issues. And I hope that he does more of that, because I think it's so powerful and could be transformative for other people. And it's amazing how, you know, it could have gone left. You know, it could have gone sideways for him, even with all the performances, just how he was acquitting himself in the public eye. And then for him to like pull it together and like transcend that and to become this, you know, this person that he is now, I think it's quite remarkable.
It's great to see him and being. I think he's expecting his second bub soon, and you know he still seems pretty fit. I know he's obviously swimming still, and
there's that like, is he going to do it again?
Well,
I hope not. Actually, like,
he left Rio. I don't think there's any more room on his chest, is there? Like I saw those medals.
There's no more. He's going to tip over.
Exactly, but you know, he was him and both Ian. Like you know, for me to actually watch them swim, I saw one session actually, which was Grant Hackett, Ian Thorpe, and Michael Phelps training together on the Gold Coast once, and it was so amazing. They had all the guys that were actually in the pool swimming with them. We actually just got out and watched them, because to have probably the four three of the greatest freestylers and or swimmers of all time to have going head to head, it just became like a show. So it was a great pleasure to watch him swim in the same era. But his mental toughness is probably the thing that stands out for me, especially in the last one where Chad Declo was declaring himself the champion, and that was you don't poke
that guy needed media training, because that's the last thing that you say to Michael Phelps unless you want to like I don't know what came over that guy.
If anything, you always put them, make them the favorite.
I know.
Deflect.
That's the one thing that gets Michael out of bed in the morning.
Fired up. Exactly.
It's crazy.
So, yeah.
And I think, we'll be seeing the impact of him for decades to come, like the inspiring young kids and the next generation of swimmers coming up. I mean, it's going to be cool to see kind of what he does next.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He seems to like golf.
Yeah, I know. I don't know. We'll see what's going to happen. Let's talk about like what fitness looks like for you now.
Okay.
Like what's your typical routine? I mean, you're still super fit.
I probably do 2 or 3 kind of structured, modified CrossFit-like sessions. So pretty intense sort of circuits. And then I probably do two swims a week. They're pretty cruisy, between 2,000 to 3,000 meters, just to and it's actually, that's my real solo time. I really enjoy that. And then that other incidental exercise, surfing and playing with the kids and that sort of stuff. So I probably don't get more than 5 structured sort of sessions in the week, but that seems to be, with work and 3 kids, etc., that's kind of manageable at the moment.
Right. And I mean, you've been able to keep it together, dude. You look like you're ready to go right now. If you got up on the blocks right now, what would you throw down in 100 free?
I don't know.
What do you think?
I think I would probably go close to 52, 53 probably.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't swim with you today.
But that's only one off, I'll probably blow my shoulder or something like that.
Yeah, it's funny how like all these devices now are on the market where people can wear, earbuds during swimming and listen to stuff. It's like, that's the last thing I want to do when I'm swimming.
And I even tried that for a while, but now it's even, just that, even the sound of the water just rushing past your ears, and all the, you can almost hear, you can definitely hear breath, you can hear heart. So for me, like, I appreciate swimming for different reasons now completely, I swim with my kids, and, it's a skill that I'm so glad that I've got. So it's much safer in the pool than I am on land, that's for sure.
Yeah. So So where do you see this all going? Just continuing to grow milk?
Yeah.
Like, what's next for you?
Yeah, for me, I think, where the business has been going nearly 10 years. So for us, I think it still has some great potential, and looking at, different partners along the way to trying to get it to a global brand. I think we're still, a small fish. So, putting that together. But still, I think for me, spending time with my kids and seeing their kind of, I've got the 6, 9 and the 12-year-old. So
those are great ages.
I used to travel a lot between Melbourne and Bali, and sort of for me, it's actually finding a little bit more, being more grounded. It was sort of, pretty hard to juggle everything. I went through a divorce a couple of years ago as well, and that sort of took a bit of a toll on me physically and mentally, and just trying to be everywhere for everybody. So I think it's been a pretty interesting time just to prioritize health, kids, my partner Desiree's been
it's
amazing.
Hard to balance all that stuff, man.
Absolutely.
It's like, and then coming from swimming where it's just like I can train 5 hours a day and then, eat and nap and all of that. And then like there's business, there's kids, there's, whatever, like trying to apportion your energy across all of those things and being somebody who is driven, who wants to excel in all of those areas. Like it's a hard equation to solve. Yeah,
it is. And it's sort of, for me as well, I wasn't great at saying no in the past, and then probably I think it's I'm sure where I heard about I don't really like letting people down in terms of the thing. So it's,
when people are asking you to do stuff, though, it's probably cool stuff too that you want to do.
Yeah, sometimes it's like it's and look, I've been very fortunate because people have done me a lot of favors, so I sort of feel like I have to repay them. But so it's definitely, I think, I'm at a phase in my life where I'm just, much better prioritizing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thanks for saying yes to this.
No, thanks for you agreeing, for yourself to agreeing to see me.
When you look back on your career, are there things you wish you had done differently, or any regrets that you have, or do you feel like, you know what, I laid it all out there, man?
Yeah, I definitely, in terms of my approach and my training, I definitely didn't leave a stone unturned in the pool and in the training pool. I think probably, overcoming some of those, I wouldn't say, like we were talking about the slightly mental sort of toughness at some of those big individual events, but I wouldn't say it's regrets. It's probably being able to work on that a little bit better, identifying that early in my career. But, I think I certainly, I certainly did the work. I got so much out of the sport. I was great friends, and it gave me an opportunity to move forward in life as well. So I'm pretty happy.
If you were going to coach young up and coming Olympian swimmers, what would you focus on, or where do you think like the white space is? Like, what do you think, like when you see these kids coming up, or you see what coaches are doing, do you see like, oh, why are they doing that? They should be doing this, or do you look at it differently? Or
I don't know. I think the guys are pretty on the money, pretty revolutionary already at the moment. Obviously, they keep improving. It's a really good question, which I don't know. I think I think what I've liked, and there's some of the Aussie guys they're still being kids. A lot of them when I was growing up, and I loved the sport. And I remember, coming back from one of the swim sessions in Perth, and I saw, Hackey and Thorpe and the guys on the PlayStation. They were still 15, 17, and I think probably if anything, it sometimes becomes too serious, so yeah, I think having let them just having fun with it, and I think if it gets too serious too quickly, it can burn out. But in terms of training methods, I think they're on the money. They're certainly better than what I was doing. So, so I can't tell them what to do anymore.
I wonder who the next huge star is going to be. I mean, the shadow that Phelps leaves is so massive. Like who could ever possibly, eclipse that? But you see some guys like Leclos coming up that have the potential to make it.
Well, I think Caleb, obviously, Dressel is
oh, right. That's who I meant to say. Caleb Dressel, yeah. He just did, it was just like short course worlds or something like that. He's like breaking world records in breaststroke.
Yeah. So I think we've found him, to be honest. Like, and he's doing in events like the 100 free, 100 fly medley. He's, so versatile. It'll be interesting to see if he can repeat that in Tokyo. I think he won 5 gold in the world champs. So, so he's the next one to watch for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting, man.
Yeah.
So if a swimmer or any athlete for that matter, young person who's trying to excel in their sport is listening to this, and maybe they don't have the greatest coach.
Yeah.
They don't have, the Australian Institute of Sport at their disposal, but they're trying to figure out on their own through podcasts and the internet or whatever, like how to be the best athlete they possibly can. Like, what can you convey to that person? Yeah.
So, I think obviously, we all understand that in sport, there's only a small percentage of athletes that win that ultimate gold or the championship or the world record, etc. I think there's so much more that you get out of the sport that you learn about yourself as well. So I would encourage, my kids aren't great in any sport in particular, but they still do it. They still, I think the routine is really important. The structure is important. And I think the ability, it prepares you, that toughness, being able to bounce back in life in general. It's what it's all about. I think there's certainly adversity is around the corner, and that's how we manage through that. And I think for me, sport was a great vehicle to learn prepare myself for life lessons in the future. I think and not just physical development. So I think I would say definitely have a crack, which is another bit of an Aussie saying, but just being able to just perseverance, persevere day to day. That's keep chipping away.
I think for a young person, it's got to be hard in our social media fuel culture, because you go on Instagram and everything looks easy and sexy and romantic. Exactly, and it's like, it ain't to be great at anything is the most unsexy thing ever, because you got to show up every single day and like slog through the mud, and it sucks, and you feel like shit, and that doesn't translate well, on Instagram,
exactly.
But that's the truth. You know what I mean? It's fucking hard, and it's about consistently showing up for whatever you care about. I think. Yeah.
It's finding that, these words keep coming up, but obviously finding the drive or whatever that purpose is. And, and it's funny because sometimes in my squad, I've had a couple of people, even in my club squad, the people that are most driven and most passionate necessarily weren't the best swimmers in our group. Some of the best ones probably had the most talent and things used to fall into place for them. But the ones that we used to fight the most were the ones that probably didn't have the most amount of talent. I think
I take that guy any day over the super talented guy who doesn't show up for workout.
Yeah, exactly. Because that, prepares you for life after sport.
Yeah. Well, were you one of those sprinter guys that slagged off? It was always the sprinters he didn't show up for morning workout again.
Yeah, no, unfortunately not. I think, I was actually, when it came to training, it was one thing that I really enjoyed, and I was, always very punctual. Used to get more. We used to cheat a little bit when sessions, when that coach was, put on some crazy sets, and then just maybe cut the warm up down a little bit.
What was the hardest set you ever did?
I don't know if it was mainly just lactic sort of tolerance stuff. So you can really sort of, as simple as doing, 3 max 100s on. You can do it really simply on 10 minutes, and then just that third one falls out. Doing, we did 6 as well, 650s max on 2 minutes as well. So, but it's just getting race ready. So I didn't do a great deal of high intensity, short rest training because of my events, but. that lactic tolerance was probably the toughest.
Painful.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man, we got to wrap this up.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Rich.
Super awesome to talk to you.
Yeah,
man.
thank you.
Very cool.
Thanks for having me.
What else do you have going on here in LA?
So actually, I'm here supporting my partner Desiree. She's got a fashion label, so she's got a bit of a publicity event tonight. So it's called SWF Boutique. So I'll be probably the Instagram husband tonight.
That's cool.
So, but I'm just making my way back home from Guatemala. So I'm enjoying this crisp weather you've got in LA.
Yeah. And are you going straight to Bali?
I'll go to Melbourne first and then go back to Bali. So I'll be back in Bali next week.
Well, I'll hook you up with my friends in Bali.
That'd be great.
I'd love to meet you.
Beautiful.
So
Thanks
awesome,
for having me.
Yeah, appreciate it. If you're digging on Michael, the best way to connect with him, milkandco.com is your skincare line. And you got like nutrition products and stuff like that too, right?
We don't anymore. We used to have some protein products, but we basically, it's called the Skin Fitness range. So we've got a chlorine wash, which is great for swimmers, a sunscreen, a bunch of other products for active people, and some natural products for babies, and some more pampering products for women. So check it out.
And the men's line is called Klim, right?
Yeah, and then the other. Well, it's funny, the blokes out there, they didn't kind of like yourself didn't get the idea that Milk and Co was Klim backwards.
They couldn't do that math.
No, it's funny when I do a couple of corporate keynotes and they. And I tell them the story that I just looked in the mirror and I mean, obviously I knew my surname was Milk backwards for many years, but it doesn't always jump out. So we did a bit of study on our products, and guys thought it was a little bit too feminine, not quite masculine enough.
Well, those Aussie guys, man.
Yeah, we just want to be tough and simple.
I want to put this on my face. Cool. And then you're at Michael Klim on Instagram
and Michael Klim 1,
right. Michael Klim 1, right? Cool.
So and
any other chosen experiences coming up?
Yeah, so we got a bunch of chosen experiences with coming up in Bali. So if you guys want to check out chosenexperiences.com, there's all the dates and locations. But come and do I've got a swimming week coming up in July, so that should be good. We do a bit of skill work, we do a bit of surfing, a fair bit of little bit of gym work, but it's a pretty fun week.
That's awesome. And it's chosenexperiences.com?
Yeah,
so
it is.
People to find out more about that.
All
right, man. Well, we'll close this down by saying my man Dan McPherson says hello, Aussie bloke. And I told you earlier, like Garrett Weber Gale called me yesterday out of the blue, who also, won a gold medal in the 4x100 free relay in a subsequent generation in an epic race as well. And I was like, I got Klim coming over to the podcast tomorrow. I was like, do you know him? Like, what should I talk to him about? And he's like, I don't really know him. He probably doesn't remember me, but he said that he was at a meet in 2005. I don't know what meet it was. Did he tell me? I can't remember.
Montreal World Championships, I think.
Some World Championships or World University. I don't know, something like that. And he said that he came up to you to meet you because you were like a big hero to him. And you ended up giving him like all your Aussie gear.
Oh, really?
And he's like, I still have it. He's like, I'll never forget that. It was like super cool. So he was like a big hero.
Oh, thanks.
So he said to say what's up.
Oh, beautiful. It's nice. It's nice when when you get that feedback after many years. It's because you never know who that person might turn to, or what effect that might have on their career.
And then he ends up getting winning that relay.
Winning that relay in 8:08. That was an amazing race. Actually, Jason Lezak's ankle leg was just...
That is probably the greatest relay race of all time.
Phenomenal. Second to us.
Okay. Well, we'll leave that open for debate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. All right, man.
Thanks,
Great
mate.
talking to you. Thanks, dude.
Thank you.